What would you do if you suspected your spouse was cheating? Would you confront them? Hire a private investigator? Or would you take matters into your own hands? Today's story is about a man who did exactly that. When his gut told him something was wrong, he faked a business trip, set up hidden cameras, and what he discovered changed his life forever. This is a story about trust, betrayal, and karma served ice cold. Let's dive in. Meet Daniel. He's 38 years old, works as a civil engineer for a construction company in Vancouver. By all accounts, Daniel had what most people would call a successful life. He'd been married to his wife Emma for 10 years. They met in university. She was studying marketing, he was in engineering. They were that couple everyone admired. You know the type. Finishing each other's sentences, inside jokes, Instagram posts that made other couples jealous. They bought their first home together 5 years ago, a beautiful condo in Yaletown with views of False Creek. No kids yet, but they'd talked about starting a family soon. Emma worked as a marketing director for a tech startup downtown. They both had good careers, made decent money, traveled twice a year, and from the outside, everything looked perfect. But here's the thing about perfect-looking marriages. Sometimes they're just that. They look perfect. On the surface. It started small, really small. The kind of things you could easily brush off or rationalize away. About 4 months before everything exploded, Daniel noticed Emma was on her phone more than usual. Now, we all use our phones a lot these days, right? But this was different. She'd be texting during dinner, something she used to hate when he did it. She'd laugh at messages, and when he'd ask what's funny, she'd just say, "Oh, just work stuff," or just the girls' group chat. Then came the appearance changes. Emma had always been attractive, always taken care of herself, but suddenly she was putting in extra effort. She joined a new gym and was going 5 times a week, sometimes even at 6 a.m. before work, which was completely out of character for someone who used to hit snooze 3 times every morning. New clothes started appearing in her closet, expensive lingerie that Daniel had never seen her wear. When he'd asked about it, she'd say she was treating herself, or that it was on sale. The late nights at work became more frequent. "Big project," she'd say. "We're launching a new campaign. The team is behind schedule." But here's what really got Daniel's attention, the way she'd position her phone. It was always face down now, always. On the table, on the couch, on the nightstand, screen down, every single time. Daniel is a logical guy. Engineers tend to be, right? They deal in facts, numbers, calculations. He didn't want to be that paranoid husband who accuses his wife without evidence. He'd seen enough movies where the suspicious spouse ends up being completely wrong and destroys their marriage over nothing. But that gut feeling, it wouldn't go away. You know that feeling. It sits in your stomach like a rock. It keeps you up at 3 a.m. It makes you replay conversations in your head, looking for inconsistencies. Daniel started paying closer attention. He noticed that Emma's girls' nights were happening almost every week now. He noticed that when her phone would ring and he was nearby, she'd let it go to voicemail. He noticed that she'd started password protecting her laptop, something she'd never done in their entire marriage. The biggest red flag came about 3 weeks before Daniel's fake business trip. He came home early from work one day. His afternoon meeting had been canceled. When he walked in the door, Emma was on the phone in their bedroom. The door was closed, which was unusual. He could hear her voice through the door. She was laughing, that flirty kind of laugh. Then he heard her say, "I can't wait to see you either." When she came out and saw him, her face went pale for just a second before she recovered. "Oh, you're home early." "That was just Sarah from work," she said quickly. Too quickly. That's when Daniel knew. He just knew. Daniel did what a lot of people do in 2024. He went digital detective. That night, while Emma was in the shower, he grabbed her iPad. They shared the same Apple ID for family purchases, which meant some of her texts synced to the tablet. He opened it with shaking hands. Part of him hoped he'd find nothing. Part of him knew he'd find everything. And there it was. Messages to a contact saved as Rick Jim, not even trying to hide it with a fake female name or anything creative. The messages went back months, 6 months to be exact. It started innocent enough, great workout today kind of stuff, but it escalated quickly. Daniel scrolled through months of conversation, and with each message, his heart broke a little more. Can't stop thinking about last night. You make me feel alive again. He's traveling next week. Maybe we can spend the whole night together. There were photos. Not explicit ones, thankfully. Daniel wasn't sure he could handle that. But photos of them together. Coffee dates. Workout selfies. One photo of them at a restaurant Daniel recognized. It was from a night Emma said she was having dinner with her college friend visiting from Toronto. Daniel's hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped the iPad. His wife of 10 years. The woman he'd planned his whole future with. She'd been living a completely separate life for 6 months. But Daniel didn't confront her. Not yet. Because he knew, and this is important, in cases like this, you need evidence. Real evidence. Especially if divorce is on the table. So Daniel took screenshots. Lots of them. Every conversation, every photo. He emailed them to himself from a secondary account Emma didn't know about. He documented everything. But Daniel wanted more. Text messages could be denied. They were just jokes. We were just talking. Nothing physical happened. He'd heard all the excuses people make. So Daniel logged into their shared phone account online. He pulled up the last 3 months of call logs and text records, and there it was. Hundreds of texts and calls. The number wasn't saved in her public contacts, but the frequency told the whole story. Multiple texts every single day. Phone calls during her lunch breaks. Late-night calls after Daniel had gone to bed. She must have been taking them in the bathroom or the spare room. Daniel cross-referenced the dates. Every time Emma said she was working late, there were texts to this number right before and after. Every girls' night out? More texts. That weekend she said she was going to a marketing conference in Seattle? Call logs showed she called this number from her hotel room. 3 times, including one call that lasted 47 minutes. Daniel felt sick, physically sick. He barely made it to the bathroom before throwing up. But he pulled himself together, because now he had phone records, he had messages. But he needed the one thing that would be undeniable in divorce court. Proof of physical infidelity. So Daniel called the number from a burner phone he bought at 7-Eleven. He blocked his number and dialed. A man's voice answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey, babe," the voice said, clearly thinking it was Emma calling from a new number. Daniel's throat went dry. He couldn't speak. He just hung up. That voice confirmed everything. This was real. This was happening. His wife was having an affair. That night, Daniel barely slept. Emma came to bed around 11 p.m., kissed him goodnight like everything was normal, and fell asleep within minutes. Meanwhile, Daniel stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. By 3 a.m., he had a plan. Daniel told Emma the next morning that his boss had called an emergency meeting in Calgary. Big construction project, potential contract worth millions. They needed their best engineer there to close the deal. He'd have to leave in 3 days and be gone for 4 days, maybe 5. Emma's reaction told him everything he needed to know. She didn't seem upset that he'd be gone. She didn't complain about being alone. Instead, her eyes lit up. "Oh, that's great, honey. I mean, not great that you have to travel, but great for the opportunity." She was almost too enthusiastic. That's when Daniel knew she'd use his absence to spend time with her affair partner. For the next 3 days, Daniel prepared. He researched home security cameras. He made sure what he was planning was legal. In British Columbia, you can record in your own home without consent, especially in common areas. He wasn't planning to put cameras in the bathroom or anything invasive like that. Just the living room, kitchen, and hallway. He ordered 3 small, discreet cameras from Amazon with overnight shipping. The kind that looked like phone chargers or small black boxes. Nothing obvious. He practiced setting them up, making sure they connected to his phone so he could monitor the feed remotely. Daniel also called a divorce lawyer. He didn't tell Emma, obviously. But he needed to know his rights, what evidence would be helpful, and how to protect his assets. The lawyer told him that British Columbia is a no-fault divorce province, meaning fault doesn't affect property division, but evidence of infidelity could impact spousal support and would definitely strengthen his case. The lawyer also told him to secure copies of all financial documents, which Daniel did. Bank statements, investment accounts, mortgage papers, everything. He created a separate email account and backed everything up to cloud storage Emma couldn't access. The morning of his business trip, Daniel played his part perfectly. He packed his suitcase in front of Emma, making sure to include his business clothes, toiletries, laptop, everything that would make the trip look legitimate. "I'll probably be back Friday night," he told her. "But if the meeting runs late or we have to do a site visit, it might be Saturday morning." "No problem," Emma said, barely looking up from her coffee and phone. "I've got a busy week anyway. Sarah and I are planning to binge-watch that new series, and I have that big presentation at work." Daniel kissed her goodbye. It felt mechanical. He wondered if this would be the last time he'd kiss his wife. Probably was. He threw his suitcase in his car, backed out of the driveway, waved to Emma, who was watching from the window, and drove away. But Daniel didn't go to the airport. He didn't even go to Calgary. He drove straight to a hotel in Richmond, about 20 minutes away from their condo, close enough to get home quickly if needed, far enough that no one would spot him. He checked in under his own name, no point in being shady about that part. Then he went back to the condo while Emma was at work. He had about 4 hours before she'd be home. Daniel worked quickly, installing the 3 cameras. One in the living room, tucked behind a decorative plant on the bookshelf. One in the kitchen, on top of the refrigerator angled toward the island and breakfast nook. One in the hallway that had a clear view of the front door and could see into the living room. He tested each one. The video quality was crystal clear. The audio worked perfectly. They were motion-activated and would record to cloud storage automatically. He could watch the feed live from his phone or laptop. Daniel took one last look around his home, a home he'd shared with Emma for 5 years, a place full of memories, some good, some now poisoned by what he'd discovered. Then he left and drove back to his hotel room. Now all he had to do was wait. Day 1 was Tuesday. Daniel sat in his hotel room with his laptop open, split screen showing all 3 camera feeds. Emma came home from work around 5:30 p.m., just like usual. She dropped her purse on the kitchen counter, kicked off her heels, and changed into comfortable clothes. She made herself dinner, just a simple salad and grilled chicken. She ate it while scrolling through her phone at the kitchen island. She texted someone. Daniel couldn't see the messages, but he could see her smiling at her screen. Around 7 p.m., she poured herself a glass of wine and settled onto the couch. She turned on Netflix and watched about 2 hours of some reality show Daniel didn't recognize. At 9:30 p.m., she called him. Daniel's phone rang and he answered, trying to sound normal. "Hey, babe, how was your flight?" Emma asked. "Long," Daniel lied. "Just got checked into the hotel. How was your day?" "Oh, same old, same old. Work was boring. I'm just watching TV now and about to head to bed soon." They chatted for maybe 5 minutes before saying goodnight. Emma told him she loved him. Daniel said it back, though the words felt like ash in his mouth. By 10:30 p.m., Emma went to the bedroom. The cameras didn't cover that area, so Daniel's view went quiet. Nothing happened. Maybe he was wrong, maybe she was waiting until later in the week, or maybe he'd misread everything. Daniel tried to sleep that night but couldn't. Doubt crept in. What if this was all innocent? What if he was destroying his marriage over a gut feeling and some suspicious texts? But deep down, he knew. He just had to wait. Wednesday, day 2. This was the day everything changed. Daniel woke up early and immediately checked the camera feeds. Emma had already left for work. The timestamp showed she'd left around 7:45 a.m. The day dragged on. Daniel couldn't focus on anything. He ordered room service for lunch but barely touched it. His eyes kept going back to his laptop screen, watching the empty rooms of his home. At 4:30 p.m., Emma came home early. That immediately set off alarm bells. She never came home before 5:30, usually closer to 6. He watched as she walked in and immediately headed to the bedroom. 20 minutes later, she emerged, and Daniel's stomach dropped. She'd showered. Her hair was blown out and styled. She was wearing makeup, more than her usual work makeup, and she was wearing that black dress, the one he'd complimented her on a few months ago when she said she'd bought it for a work function, the one with the low neckline that she'd told him was too much when he suggested she wear it on their anniversary. She was wearing it now, along with heels and that expensive perfume she usually saved for special occasions. Daniel watched as Emma set out 2 wine glasses on the kitchen counter. She put a bottle of red wine, the expensive kind they usually saved for celebrations, on the counter to breathe. She dimmed the living room lights. She even lit candles. She was preparing for a date, in their home, in his home. At 8:27 p.m., the doorbell rang. Emma checked herself in the hallway mirror one more time, adjusted her dress, and opened the door. A man walked in. He was probably in his early 40s, fit, well-dressed in dark jeans and a button-down shirt. Handsome, Daniel supposed, though it killed him to think it. The moment Emma opened that door, the man pulled her into a kiss. Not a friendly peck. A deep, passionate kiss. Right there in the doorway. Emma melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck. Daniel felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Seeing it with his own eyes was completely different from reading text messages. This was real. This was happening. In his home. They moved into the living room, still kissing. The man said something Daniel couldn't quite hear, and Emma laughed. That same flirty laugh Daniel had heard through the bedroom door weeks ago. She poured them both wine. They sat on the couch, his couch, close together. Her legs draped over his lap. They talked, laughed, drank. The man's hand was on Emma's thigh, slowly moving higher. Emma didn't stop him. For the next 3 hours, Daniel watched his marriage die. He watched his wife betray him in their own home. He watched her be affectionate, loving, and intimate with another man in a way she hadn't been with Daniel in months. They drank the entire bottle of wine. They kissed constantly. Emma sat in his lap at one point. The man's hands were all over her. Emma whispered something in his ear that made him laugh. Around 11:30 p.m., they moved toward the hallway, presumably heading to the guest bedroom. At least Emma had enough conscience not to use their marital bed. Daniel couldn't watch anymore. He'd seen enough. He had everything he needed. He closed his laptop and sat in his dark hotel room, tears streaming down his face. His marriage was over. The woman he'd loved for a decade, the woman he'd built a life with, the woman he'd trusted completely. She was gone. Maybe she'd been gone for a long time, and he just hadn't seen it. But the grieving would come later. Right now, Daniel had evidence. Clear, undeniable, time-stamped video evidence of his wife's infidelity, and he was going to use it. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. He spent hours downloading all the video footage, backing it up to multiple cloud storage accounts, and emailing copies to his lawyer. The affair partner left around midnight. Daniel watched him kiss Emma goodbye at the door, telling her he'd see her soon. By 2 a.m., Daniel had made his decision. He wasn't going to wait until Friday. He was going home Thursday morning. At 6 a.m., while Emma was still asleep, Daniel checked out of the hotel and drove home. He parked on the street instead of the driveway, wanted to maintain the element of surprise. He let himself in quietly. The house still smelled like that guy's cologne. There were 2 wine glasses in the sink. A candle was still out on the coffee table. Daniel made coffee, just sat at the kitchen table and waited. He was surprisingly calm. The shock and devastation from the night before had hardened into something else. Resolve, maybe, or just emotional numbness. At 7:15 a.m., he heard Emma's footsteps upstairs. She came down in her bathrobe, hair messy, eyes half closed, heading straight for the coffee maker like she did every morning. She didn't even see him at first. When she did, she literally jumped. "Daniel! Oh my God, you scared me! What are you doing home? I thought you weren't back until Friday." Her face was pure shock. Maybe a flash of panic, too, though she tried to hide it. "Meeting got canceled," Daniel said calmly. "Wrapped up early. Got in late last night." He watched Emma's face carefully. She was calculating, trying to figure out if he'd been home when anything happened. "Oh," she said slowly. That's great. I didn't hear you come in. I got in around 2 a.m. You were sleeping. Didn't want to wake you." Emma visibly relaxed. She thought she was safe. She thought she'd gotten away with it. "How was your trip?" she asked, moving to pour herself coffee, trying to sound normal. "It was interesting," Daniel said, "but not as interesting as what happened here." Emma froze, coffee pot in hand. "What do you mean?" Daniel pulled out his laptop, turned it around, pressed play. The video showed Emma opening the door, showed her kissing the man, showed everything that happened after. Emma's face went white. The color literally drained from her face. The coffee pot shook in her hand before she set it down with a clatter. "Daniel, Don't," he cut her off. "Don't insult me by lying. Don't tell me it's not what it looks like. Don't tell me it was a mistake. I have hours of footage, Emma, hours. And that's just from last night." He pulled out his phone and started scrolling. "I also have 6 months of text messages, phone records showing hundreds of calls and texts, photos of you two together, hotel receipts, restaurant charges on our joint credit card from places you told me you were going with friends." Emma's legs seemed to give out. She slumped against the kitchen counter, tears starting to stream down her face. "How long have you known?" she whispered. "Long enough," Daniel said coldly. "Long enough to consult a lawyer. Long enough to document everything. Long enough to open separate bank accounts. Long enough to accept that my marriage is over." "Daniel, please. I can explain." "No," he said firmly. "You can't explain this away. There's no explanation that makes this okay. You've been having an affair for 6 months. You brought him into our home. You planned this. This wasn't some drunken mistake or moment of weakness. This was calculated. This was a choice you made over and over and over again." Emma was crying hard now. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. It just happened. He made me feel—" "I don't care what he made you feel," Daniel interrupted. "You're my wife. If you weren't happy, if something was missing, you talk to me. You don't betray me. You don't lie to me for 6 months. You don't bring another man into our home, into our bed." "We didn't use our bed," Emma protested. "We used the guest room. I would never—" "You think that matters?" Daniel's voice rose for the first time. "You think the location matters? You cheated on me in our home, Emma. Our home." He stood up, grabbed his laptop. "I'm leaving. I've already moved most of my important stuff out. My lawyer will be in touch. I'll be filing for divorce." "Daniel, please, can't we talk about this? Can't we try counseling? It's over with him, I swear, it's over. I'll never see him again." "It's over between us, Emma. The moment you invited him through that door, the moment you kissed him, the moment you chose him over our marriage, it was over." Daniel walked toward the door. Emma followed him, crying, pleading. "I love you," she said desperately. "I still love you. It was a mistake. Please don't throw away 10 years over a mistake." Daniel stopped at the door and turned to look at her. "You don't betray someone you love. And this wasn't a mistake, Emma. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. This was 6 months of deliberate choices, 6 months of lying, 6 months of betrayal." He opened the door. "Oh, and Emma? Rick's wife is getting this footage too. I found out he's married, has been for 12 years, has 2 kids. I'm sure she'll be just as thrilled as I am about your little relationship." And with that, Daniel left. Daniel stayed with his brother for the next few weeks while the legal process began. He sent the footage to his lawyer, who confirmed it would significantly strengthen his case. He also made good on his promise. He found Rick's wife. Turns out Rick's last name was on the gym membership site Emma and him both belonged to. A little social media stalking, and Daniel found Rick's Facebook profile. Married to Jennifer, 2 kids, ages 7 and 9, photos of family vacations, birthday parties, soccer games, another perfect-looking family destroyed by infidelity. Daniel created an anonymous email account and sent Jennifer the footage with a simple message. "I thought you should know who your husband has been spending time with. My wife is the woman in this video. I'm divorcing her. You deserve to know the truth too." Jennifer responded within hours. She was devastated, but grateful. She filed for divorce 2 weeks later. As for Emma, the fallout was immediate and brutal. Their mutual friends had to choose sides, and most chose Daniel's once they learned what happened. Emma's family was disappointed in her. Her father actually called Daniel to apologize, which was awkward but appreciated. Emma had to explain to her work colleagues why she was suddenly wearing wedding rings anymore. The tech startup she worked for had a strict policy about workplace relationships and ethics. While Rick hadn't technically worked there, the situation reflected poorly on Emma's judgment. She wasn't fired, but she was passed over for a promotion she'd been counting on. The divorce process took about 6 months. Because British Columbia is a no-fault province, the property was divided relatively equally, but Emma had to buy Daniel out of his half of the condo since she wanted to keep it. The evidence of infidelity meant she didn't get spousal support, which she'd been hoping for since Daniel made slightly more money. Daniel heard through mutual acquaintances that Emma tried to continue the relationship with Rick after everything fell apart, but Rick ghosted her completely once his own marriage imploded. Turns out when it was no longer exciting and forbidden, when there were real consequences, Rick wasn't interested anymore. Emma ended up selling the condo anyway. She couldn't afford it on her own, and living there with all those memories was apparently too much. Last Daniel heard, she'd moved to a small apartment in Surrey and was still single. As for Daniel, it took him about a year to really process everything and heal. He did therapy, which helped. He threw himself into work, got promoted. He took a solo trip to Japan, something he'd always wanted to do, but Emma had never been interested in. About 18 months after the divorce was finalized, Daniel met someone new. Her name was Rachel, she was a teacher, and she'd been through a messy divorce of her own. They took things slow, built trust gradually. Daniel was cautious. You don't go through what he went through without developing some trust issues. But Rachel was patient, understanding, and most importantly, honest. They got engaged a year ago and are planning a wedding for next fall. Daniel still has the footage saved, backed up in 3 different places. He'll probably never delete it. Not because he wants to torture himself, but because it's a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the worst betrayals come from the people you trust most. A reminder that trusting your gut is important, and a reminder that sometimes the trash takes itself out. So what can we learn from Daniel's story? First, trust your instincts. If something feels off, it usually is. Daniel's gut was screaming at him for months, and he was right to listen to it. Second, if you're going to investigate, do it legally and thoroughly. Daniel didn't hack Emma's accounts or hire someone to follow her. He used information he had legal access to and recorded in his own home, which was within his rights. Third, evidence matters. Without that footage, Emma could have denied everything, minimized it, or convinced Daniel he was overreacting. The video left no room for gaslighting or manipulation. And finally, and this is the most important one, betrayal reveals character. When Emma had the choice between her marriage and her affair, she chose the affair, over and over for 6 months. That's who she was when it mattered most. Was Daniel's method extreme? Maybe. Some people think the hidden cameras were too far, that he should have just confronted her with the text messages, but Daniel wanted the truth. The complete, undeniable truth. And that's what he got. As for whether Emma got what she deserved, well, she lost her marriage, her home, her reputation, and the man she was cheating with. She destroyed 2 marriages for an affair that didn't even last beyond the fallout. That's karma, served ice cold. That's karma, served ice cold. What do you think? Did Daniel do the right thing? Was the hidden camera too far or exactly what the situation needed? And what would you have done in his position? Let me know in the comments below.